I had already reached for my coat when my cousin grabbed my arm. That was the moment I almost left my own grandmother's funeral reception without anyone knowing who I really was. And honestly, part of me was fine with that. Let me back up. My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old, and until about 4 months ago, my father hadn't spoken to me in 6 years. Not since the night I told him I wasn't going to join his construction company, wasn't going to settle down in Sudbury, and wasn't going to live the life he'd already mapped out for me on a piece of graph paper like one of his job site blueprints. He didn't yell. That wasn't his way. He just looked at me across the kitchen table, folded that piece of paper in half and said, "Then you're on your own," and he meant it. My mother passed when I was 12. After that, it was just my father, my older brother Daniel, and me growing up in a 3-bedroom house on Lorne Street, with a driveway that always needed shoveling and a father who showed love through criticism and silence in equal measure. Daniel was the golden one, stayed local, learned the trade, took over the estimating side of the business by the time he was 24. My father lit up when he talked about Daniel. Literally, physically, his shoulders would drop and something in his face would soften. When he talked about me, his jaw would tighten. I was the one who got too many ideas from books. The one who applied to universities without telling him. The one who came home after her first year at Western with a declared major in biochemistry and a look on her face that said she wasn't asking permission. We had years of tension before that final conversation at the kitchen table. By the time he folded that piece of paper, we had both been waiting for it. I finished my degree. Then another one. Then I did my residency in Toronto, which was brutal in the way that all residencies are brutal, sleepless, and humbling, and occasionally extraordinary. I specialized in pediatric surgery. I won't tell you it was easy, because it wasn't, and anyone who tells you medicine is a calling, and therefore the hard parts don't hurt, is either lying or has a very short memory. I built a life in Toronto. A good one. A small condo near Roncesvalles. A circle of colleagues who became genuine friends. A Saturday morning routine that involved the farmers market on Sororin, and very strong coffee. I called my grandmother every Sunday without fail. She was my father's mother, Grandma Loretta, and she had a gift for loving her family without taking sides, which is harder than it sounds. She never once asked me to reconcile with my father. She also never once stopped asking about my work with the kind of genuine curiosity that made me feel seen. When I told her about a difficult case, she listened. When I told her about a success, she celebrated it like she'd been in the operating room with me. She passed in October. Quietly, in her sleep, at 81, in the house in Sudbury she'd lived in for 50 years. My aunt called me at 6 in the morning and I sat on the edge of my bed in Toronto and cried in a way I hadn't cried since my mother died. I drove up for the funeral, of course. I didn't ask my father's permission. I didn't announce I was coming. Grandma Loretta was my grandmother too, and I was going to say goodbye to her regardless of whatever complicated geography existed between me and the rest of that family. The funeral itself was fine. I sat near the back. My father saw me walk in and his expression went through several things in about 2 seconds before settling into something flat and unreadable. Daniel gave me a stiff nod. My aunt and 2 of my cousins hugged me. Nobody made a scene. Grandma Loretta would have hated a scene. The reception was at my father's house. I almost didn't go. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Street Andrews for about 10 minutes asking myself what the right thing to do was. Grandma Loretta's friends would be there, people who had known me since I was small, and I wanted to see them. I wanted to be in her memory a little longer before I drove back south. So I went. The house was full when I arrived. Someone had put out a spread that included Grandma Loretta's butter tarts, which made me catch my breath for a second. There was tea and coffee, and a few bottles of wine open on the kitchen counter. Her photo was on the mantel, a good one, taken at my cousin Sophie's wedding 3 years ago, her laughing at something off camera with her whole face. I moved through the room quietly, spoke with her friend Margaret, who had known her for 40 years, and told me a story about the 2 of them getting lost on a bus in Lisbon in 1987 that made me laugh out loud. Said hello to her neighbor from across the street, got a cup of tea, and stood near the window and felt, for a little while, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My father found me about 40 minutes in. He didn't come over warmly. He crossed the room with purpose, and when he reached me he kept his voice low, which I recognized as the register he used when he wanted to say something that would land hard without anyone else hearing it. "I didn't expect you to come here," he said. "She was my grandmother," I said. I kept my voice even. I had learned over years that evenness was the only thing that worked with him. "You want to show your face after 6 years?" He wasn't asking. "You think that's appropriate?" I think being here to say goodbye to her is appropriate, yes. He looked at me the way he used to look at a structural estimate that didn't add up. You always had an answer for everything. I didn't say anything to that. Daniel's here with his family, my father continued. This isn't the time for whatever you think you're doing. I'm having tea at my grandmother's reception, I said. I'm not doing anything. He shook his head slowly. You were always so sure you knew better than everyone. Took off. Never looked back. And now you walk in here like family, I said quietly. That landed somewhere. I could see it, but he didn't back down. You made your choices, he said. You chose that life down there. Fine. But this family has kept going without you, and walking in here today doesn't change that. He paused. I think it would be better if you said your goodbyes and headed back. There it was. I had driven 4.5 hours. I had sat through a funeral holding myself together so carefully I could feel the effort of it in my shoulders. I had stood in the room where Grandma Loretta's photo smiled down from the mantel, and talked to her oldest friends, and felt close to her for the first time since October. And my father was standing in front of me telling me to leave. I put my cup down on the windowsill. I thought about saying any number of things. I had a full inventory of them, sentences I had rehearsed in my head during long nights on call, things I should have said years ago. But Grandma Loretta's face was on the mantel, and she had never once used our estrangement as a weapon, and I wanted to be, in that moment, at least a little like her. So I reached for my coat. That was when my cousin Marcus came across the room. Marcus is my father's nephew, my first cousin on that side, and he has worked for the last 8 years as a paramedic with Greater Sudbury Paramedic Services. He is a big, straightforward person who thinks carefully before he speaks, which I have always respected. He got to me just as I was pulling my coat from the rack by the door, and he put his hand on my arm. Claire, he said, don't go. It's fine, I said. I don't want to make today harder than it already is. I heard what he said to you. Marcus wasn't whispering. He wasn't shouting either, but he was using his full voice, and the room was not that large. A few people nearby went still. I heard it, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't. Marcus. No. He looked at me, and then he looked at my father, who had stayed where he was. I'm sorry, Uncle Ron. I have a lot of respect for you. You know I do. But I need to say something. My father's jaw tightened. This isn't the time. It kind of is, though, Marcus said. He wasn't aggressive about it. He was calm in the specific way that someone is calm when they've made a decision and are standing behind it. I recognized that calm. I used it in the hospital sometimes. This is Claire. She drove up from Toronto this morning to say goodbye to Grandma, the same as everyone else in this room. My father started. She's a pediatric surgeon at Sick Kids, Marcus said. The room got very quiet. He continued. I found out 2 years ago because I transferred a patient down there, a little boy, 4 years old, bad accident on the 69. She was the attending. I watched her work. I've been a paramedic for 8 years, Uncle Ron. I've seen a lot of physicians. She's not just good. She's the kind of doctor that parents ask for by name when their kid's life is on the line. My father was looking at Marcus. Then he looked at me. She didn't tell me I could share that, Marcus added, glancing at me with something almost apologetic in his expression, and she probably would have left without saying anything. But I think you should know who you just asked to leave Grandma Loretta's house. The silence in that room was the particular kind that happens when a gathering of people simultaneously recalibrates. I wasn't going to cry. I had not come here for this, had not wanted this, and I especially had not wanted it today, of all days, in this house, in front of these people. But there was something happening behind my sternum that required careful management. Margaret, Grandma Loretta's friend, said from across the room, quite clearly, I knew that girl was going to do something remarkable. Loretta always said so. My father hadn't moved. I looked at him. He was a 63-year-old man with calloused hands and a face that had been weathered by decades of Northern Ontario winters and construction sites and, I know, grief. He had lost his wife when his daughter was 12, and his son was 15, and I think he never fully recovered from that. Not really. And I think some of his hardness toward me was the deflected shape of that loss. I had understood that for years. Understanding it didn't make it hurt less. But standing there, watching him process what Marcus had just said, I didn't feel the satisfaction I might have expected. I didn't feel vindicated, exactly. I felt tired and sad, and I missed my grandmother. Daniel came forward from the other side of the room. He looked uncomfortable in the way people look when they realize they've been part of something without fully examining it. "Claire," he said. "It's okay," I told him. "You don't have to." "I didn't know," he said. "I mean, you never said anything about any of it." "You never asked," I said. Not unkindly, just accurately. He absorbed that. My father took a step toward me. Just one. His hands were at his sides, and he had the expression of someone who has just discovered that the blueprint they've been working from for years has a fundamental error in it, and they're not sure yet what to do about that. "A surgeon," he said. "Yes." "At sick kids." "Yes." He looked at the floor. Something moved through him that I couldn't fully read. When he looked back up, his voice was different. Quieter. Not soft, my father doesn't really do soft, but less defended. "I didn't know that," he said. "I know you didn't. Why didn't you—" He stopped. Started again. "Why didn't you tell me?" I thought about it for a moment. The real answer, not a quick one. "Because I needed it to be mine," I said. "The training, the work, all of it, I needed it to belong to me, not to be something I reported back to you so you could decide whether it counted." I paused. "And because I think part of me was afraid you'd find a way to make me feel like it still wasn't enough. And I couldn't afford to feel that way. Not when I had people depending on me." That landed. My father was quiet for a long time. Around us, the room had gradually resumed its low hum of conversation, people giving us what privacy they could in a house that didn't have much of it. Margaret was talking to my aunt. Daniel had moved to stand next to his wife and was staring at his shoes. "Your grandmother talked about you," my father finally said. "Every Sunday, she talked about you." "I know, I called her every Sunday. She never told me what you were doing." He paused. "I think that was on purpose." "Probably," I said. "That was Grandma." Something in him shifted then. Not a complete shift, this wasn't a movie, and my father is not a man who reverses course in a single afternoon over butter tarts and tea. But something. "I don't know how to," he stopped. "You don't have to do anything today," I said. "It's her reception. Let's just be here for her." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Short and deliberate, the way he agreed to things. I stayed for another 2 hours. My father didn't ask me to leave again. At one point, he came and stood near me while Margaret was telling another story about Grandma Loretta, and he didn't move away when our arms were almost touching. It wasn't reconciliation. Not that day. It was something smaller and more fragile than that, a pause in something that had been going in one direction for a very long time. I wasn't ready to call it more than that, and I don't think he was either. When I finally got my coat at the end of the evening, this time to actually go, my father was in the hallway. "Drive safe," he said. "The 69 gets icy after Perry Sound." "I know," I said. "I've done it enough times." He almost said something else. I could see it in the way he held himself, the slight adjustment of weight that meant words were forming. But whatever it was, he kept it for another time. I drove home through the dark and the cold, past frozen lakes reflecting a half moon, past the gas stations and the Canadian Shield outcroppings and the long, empty stretches where the trees come right to the edge of the highway. I thought about Grandma Loretta. I thought about the butter tarts. I thought about my 4-year-old patient from 2 years ago, the one Marcus had transferred, the one who had come in broken and left whole, who sent me a drawing at Christmas last year of a dinosaur wearing a doctor's coat, with my name spelled mostly right at the bottom. I thought about what it means to love people who make it hard. I thought about how my grandmother had managed to love all of us, the whole complicated mess of us, without ever using that love as leverage. I thought about how long it takes to learn that, and how some people never do. I don't know what happens next with my father. I think there will be a phone call at some point, a difficult one, full of the particular awkwardness of people who have been strangers to each other, despite sharing a name. I think it will take more than one. I think there are things that need to be said that neither of us is fully ready to say yet. But I know this. I didn't leave before I was ready. I stayed for my grandmother. I said goodbye to her properly, in the house where she lived, surrounded by the people who loved her. And when someone tried to send me away, the person who stopped it wasn't me. I didn't have to defend myself, didn't have to list my credentials or justify my presence or prove anything to anyone. Someone who had seen me work, who had watched me fight for a child's life on a cold Tuesday morning in a trauma bay, spoke up because he thought it was right. That's not something you plan. You just live your life the best way you know how, and sometimes the work speaks on its own. I got home around midnight, put the kettle on, sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and the particular quiet of a Toronto apartment after a long day. Then I called my voicemail, and there was a message from a number I hadn't heard from in 6 years. My father's voice. Short, like he'd practiced it and then done it quickly before he could change his mind. "It's me. I'm glad you were there today." Loretta would have wanted that. A pause. I think I would have wanted it too. Even if I wasn't showing it right. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. I sat with that for a long time. There's a thing they teach you early in surgical training that the goal isn't to be the hero in the room. The goal is just to do the work with enough care and enough precision that the outcome speaks for itself. You don't need the patient to know your name. You don't need anyone's applause. The work is the thing. I've tried to live like that. Not perfectly, not always. But I've tried. And somewhere in Sudbury, in a house on Lorne Street with a driveway that always needs shoveling, my father left a voicemail that tells me that maybe, if we're both willing, some things that have been broken for a long time can be looked at again. Not fixed, not overnight, but looked at. That's enough to start with.